Welcome to Healing the Spirit, a space where we awaken our creativity, deepen our connections, and remember who we are through the lens of astrology, archetypes, and art making. I'm your host, Jonathan Coe. Hello everyone, welcome to Healing the Spirit. I hope that whenever you're listening to this, you're able to access some ease and peace and grace. And if not, that's fine too. If you're listening to this at the time I'm releasing it, on September 16th, we are about to enter the second eclipse portal of the year. Eclipses are intense. Eclipses bring about change. Eclipses are times when there may not be a whole lot of clarity or illumination. If we think about the eclipse, right, the eclipse is a time when one or both of the luminaries are at least partially blocked, right? So we have this experience of the celestial objects that are lending light and perhaps clarity or illumination into our lived reality being obstructed in some ways, right? And so eclipses can be challenging for that reason because our thinking minds really like clarity. And to add to that, there's also all of this mutable energy. But yeah, I just want to let you know that if you're experiencing a lot of confusion, changes, shifts that maybe feel uncomfortable or feel challenging because you don't see the answer or the solution right away, trust the process and affirm the discomfort because it's probably quite uncomfortable. Okay, so I want to dedicate this episode to talking about Shapeshifting Academy, which is a container that I'm creating. I'm really excited about this container. I can't wait to facilitate it. We have a number of people signing up already, and I'm so excited to do this work with all of you. And if you are one of those people who have signed up for this, thank you. And yeah, we're starting October 3rd, 2024, which is on a Thursday. So if you're listening to this anytime before that or even after, and you would like to join us, I really would like to invite you. In this episode, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about why I created Shapeshifting Academy, who it's for, and what we're going to be learning in this container. So as of the time that I'm recording, which is September 2024, Shapeshifting Academy is a 6-week container where we deepen into the wisdom of the mutable signs in astrology, which are Sagittarius, Pisces, Virgo, and Gemini, as well as their traditional rulers, Jupiter and Mercury. This container is a hybrid between mental spiritual contemplations of astrological concepts and energetic somatic explorations that are connected to some of the themes that these archetypes, these beings, these spirits are bringing up for us. Meaning we will both approach the topics of shapeshifting, of mutability, of changes, pivots, the mutable signs, Jupiter and Mercury, through the lens of our minds, through the lens of what they represent in the study of astrology, as well as through reflecting on our individual lived experiences, on our observations about reality, and through experimenting essentially with what happens to our lived reality when we collaborate with our very mutable minds and very mutable energies to birth a new paradigm, to birth new patterns in our lives. In short, Shapeshifting Academy is an immersive experience that's centered around and built upon the foundations of astrological theories, but it will take it beyond the two-dimensional approach of textbook astrology, meaning this is what the sign means, this is what the sign is saying, this is what this planet means in our charts. And we'll take it beyond that into the multidimensional approach of allowing the lived, embodied, breathing, dynamic wisdom of astrology to inform our day-to-day reality. So, why did I create Shapeshifting Academy? The short answer is we are all such dynamic creatures. We contain multitudes, as Walt Whitman would say, and we often live within a cultural framework that really prizes a narrow definition of what it means to be a legitimate human being, right? What it means to be successful, what it means to have fame or money or love, right? And our culture really prizes the linear ways of achieving them. A lot of us, myself included, can sometimes feel really, really afraid of allowing more of that multidimensional parts of us to come out, to play, to be seen, and to experiment. In my own journey, the mutable signs have been such important teachers and important guides in accepting my multidimensionality and then designing and building a life and a way of being where I can gently continue to unfurl into more of my multidimensionality rather than shrinking into a squashed version of myself that I believe I need to be in order to survive in this world. And we all work with this tension all the time, right? Some part of me have been conditioned to believe that I need to squash myself down. I need to be more legible. I need to be a little bit smaller so that people can understand me and I can belong and I can function in society, right? And I don't think that there's necessarily anything wrong with that process of allowing yourself to be more specific given your circumstances, right? We all do need to, at certain points in our lives, make sure that we can communicate with other people. And in order to communicate and in order to relate to other people, often we do need to meet people where they're at, right? Which is not always where we're at. But I think that if we begin with accepting and embracing more of our multidimensional selves and then consciously practicing shifting shapes from one part of ourselves or one facet of ourselves into another, we can start to have a relationship with reality that is more playful, that is more exciting, that is more honoring of our agency, right? The reality that we have the ability to essentially choose which facets of reality do I want to step into? Which facets of ourselves do we want to step into? So in short, Shapeshifting Academy is a container where together we will explore what it means to hone more of that skill to allow the multidimensional aspects of you to come in. Before I go further, I am aware that maybe not everyone is familiar with this concept of mutability. Or even if you're familiar, you may need a little bit of a refresher, or you want to go a little bit deeper into the 101 definition of mutability through the lens of astrology. So let's do that. There are 12 signs in astrology, and there are multiple ways to classify or to group these signs. One way to group the signs is by their modality. I think of the signs' modality as having to do with their directionality, with the way that their energies tend to move. We have cardinal signs, fixed signs, and mutable signs. One way to understand them is by looking at the seasons. Cardinal signs begin the seasons, they start the seasons, and so they break through the inertia of the previous season and bring forward this tremendous forward-moving energy. And then cardinal signs lead us to the fixed signs. The fixed signs are the height of the seasons. After the cardinal signs set up the stage for a particular season, the energy then blossoms into the peak expression of that season. And then, of course, after we experience the peak, the season needs to end, right? And the process of ending a season is represented by the mutable signs. The mutable signs reorganize, they rearrange, they decompose things. The mutable signs question things, they confuse things, they queer things. The mutable signs are liminal. They represent this in-between time, and they also represent, in other facets of life, the parts of reality that connect one distinct part with another, right? One thing I've been thinking about with the mutable signs is that they represent, for example, the fascia in the body, right? Which is this connective tissue. People didn't know what to do with the fascia for a very long time until body workers who are curious about the connective tissue that allows things to circulate, they start to get curious about what the roles are and what happens when we start working with those things that connect one thing to the other, right? Mutable signs provide the bridge. And in providing the bridge, they are also liminal. They're neither of one side or the other side, right? They're not about finding one answer because they're really about ushering in multiplicity, possibilities, and flexibility, right? They're natural shapeshifters because their job is really to deconstruct what is and to bring in what's to come. And in so doing, mutable signs invite us to become more present. Mutable signs are by nature surprising. Mutable signs can be confusing, and they also can be a lot of fun to work with when we are open to being surprised and having things come into our reality that we didn't expect, right? They have the possibilities of expanding our perspectives and inviting us to be more versatile, to not get stuck in one mode of being. So let's quickly talk about each of the mutable signs and their characteristics. If we begin the wheel of the zodiac with Aries, then we start with Gemini, which is the first mutable sign, and Gemini is mutable air. It's ruled by Mercury, and Gemini is about recognizing that there are infinite perspectives. There are as many perspectives as there are beings in this reality. And therefore, there's no one truth because there's a lot of different perspective. And all that exists is one being's truth based on their perspective at any given moment. And so, Gemini has to do with asking better questions, investigating multiple perspectives, more so than it's about arriving at one answer. I associate Gemini with pollinators, beings like bees, butterflies, insects, and usually pollinators do their job not necessarily by being singular in their strategy, right? If you look at the way that pollinators move, they don't move the way that larger predators move, right? If you look at a lion, for example, or a tiger, right? They usually move in a very strategic way. They pay attention to their prey, and then at the right time, they jump and they attack their prey, right? But if you look at bees or butterflies, they don't pollinate in that way. They pollinate by moving around. And in that process of the seemingly random trajectory of flitting about, what they're doing is they're allowing pollen to be spread around in the field, right? That's how they get the job done. So when we think about mutable air, we think about the ways that the things we associate with the element of air, intellect, information, processing things on a cognitive level, identities even, right? Because identities really are just mental concepts, are actually mutable, and if we allow these air-related things to move about, something happens. Something mysterious can emerge, and something surprising can come out from the depths. The next mutable sign in the wheel of the zodiac is Virgo. Virgo is mutable earth, and it's also ruled by Mercury. Mercury in Virgo is Mercury in its nocturnal, nightly, yin guise, and in the northern hemisphere, we can think of Virgo as wrapping up the summer and introducing fall. And so Virgo has to do with discerning what to do with the harvest, right? After we enjoy the height of the summer, where all the vegetables and the fruits have sprung out from the earth, right? Virgo has to do with figuring out what to do with what we've harvested. Virgo has to do with selection, with filtering, with being practical around what is implementable and what is not implementable, what needs to decay and what needs to be transformed into a different form so that it can last and it can be functional, right? Virgo is deeply in touch with the ways that the unseen, right, is represented in the tangible. The spiritual is in the form. Virgo is choosy with a form, and therefore it has to do with an awareness that certain forms are more effective, more efficient, more honoring than others for specific ideas, specific spirits, specific energies at particular times. Virgo looks at the bounty of the harvest and decides what to do with it. Maybe some of the fruits need to be transformed into a jam so that it's not rotten, right? Maybe some of the vegetables need to be fermented. Maybe some of the wild caught fish needs to be smoked in order to last through the fall and the winter. And then next, we have Sagittarius, which is mutable fire, and Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter. Sagittarius is about being connected to divine inspiration, to divine calling, to feel the transferable nature of passion and inspiration. So when we think about fire, often we think about excitement with our connection to spirit, that which moves us, that which burns within us, that which gets us excited about something. When we light a candle using another flame, maybe using our matches or with our lighter, we get to see this mutable quality of fire. Fire can easily transfer from one flammable object to another. And likewise, if we think of it spiritually or metaphysically, divine inspiration through the perspective of Sagittarius is something that we can receive as a vessel from some external source on the subtle realm. And then we're invited to share it with others. Share that feeling of being awakened, of being moved by something greater than us, something beyond us to other people. In this moment, as I'm speaking to you, right? Yes, I'm using my words, which may be more related to the air sign. But if we think about it in terms of Sagittarius, you can probably feel my excitement and my deep, deep relationship with mutable signs. And in this process, I am transferring my passion for mutable signs to you, right? And that's what Sagittarius does. Sagittarius is about showing up in such a way that can really get the essence of our divine inspiration across to another being, right? And it's in that process, there's a ripple effect, right? In that process, there's a warming that happens to our larger ecosystem. And finally, we have Pisces, which is mutable water, and Pisces is also ruled by Jupiter. Pisces dissolves boundaries between things, between beings, and in so doing, Pisces thaws what was previously frozen back into a state where it can come alive again, right? All the mutable signs represent paradox, but to me, Pisces is perhaps the ultimate paradox. As the final sign of the zodiac, Pisces represents how life can only sprout out from the kind of nourishment that's made available through death, right? If we think about Pisces as the thing that connects Aquarius and Aries, right? As that which connects the height of winter to the start of the spring, Pisces has so much to do with what does it mean to melt the ice so that life can sprout up again, right? Pisces represents the Akashic consciousness that is in touch with the reality of the quantum field. And on that level of awareness, there's no separation between one person and another, between humans and the world around them, between the existence of aliveness in one being and another, right? Pisces sees the connection of all the connection to the all, and through that ability of seeing and sensing that connection, that perspective that nothing is ever separate from the rest of creation, Pisces restores the faith in the coherence, in the wholeness of what it means to be alive. So why are mutable signs teachers of shapeshifting, right? To me, mutable signs are always looking for the essence, right? Mutable signs are not attached to forms, or mutable signs teach us the wisdom of what it means to be in a landscape and in a situation where we cannot attach to form, where there's not just one answer, where there's not just one perspective, right? Which requires a lot of faith to move through, which requires a lot of creativity to move through, right? When I think about the process of mutability, I always think about caterpillars. Caterpillars dissolve themselves within the chrysalis so that it can transform into butterflies. And there's no guarantee in this process, right? A lot of caterpillars didn't make it to become a butterfly, right? The process of transitions, transformations, transmutation, there is no guarantee in these processes, right? And so, in embracing the loss of form, what we do is we embrace the possibility of the spirit, right? We embrace the possibility of the multidimensional part of us, right? And to me, multidimensionality is really the key to being with great changes, both intentional and not. Because when we are moving through great changes, usually what happens is we're moving from a time, a space, a situation where we are being validated or affirmed in one aspect of who we are, and we're being asked to let go of that and to emerge on the other side holding a different identity, right? My clients often come to me for moving through transformations, moving from one relationship to another, moving from one job to another, one identity to another. That moment that a lot of mothers move through when their kids go off to college can be really scary, because I've never been a mother, so this is a big assumption, but perhaps you've been attached to the identity that you are the go-to person for your kid. And now that your kid is off to college, you can no longer be that go-to person for them. Maybe you can support them emotionally, maybe you can support them in making decisions, but you can no longer support them in finding their socks, right? And so all of these moments of great transitions require us to embrace our multidimensionality, because it's almost like we're being asked to go into the cosmic bank of all the selves that exist within us, all the roles, all the dimensions of who we are, and we're being asked to basically change clothes, change shape. And that is often not something that we want to do. That's something that often we feel a lot of resistance towards. I mean, I'm speaking from the I here, but every time I feel from spirit that my work is about to change, for example, earlier this year when I got clear messages that it's not nutritive anymore for me to be doing the weekly contemplations, I moved through a lot of resistance. I didn't want to do that because I know how much that offering nourished me and how much it nourished the people who listened to it. And yet I was also aware that on a deeper level, I was being asked to let go of some aspects of how I've been showing up publicly. And that's really hard. A lot of us wait until we have no choice in order to practice being mutable. What we don't practice on a regular basis, we don't become fluent at. And when we're not fluent at something, when we don't have a lot of skill around something, then when it comes to high pressure things, it feels traumatic. My point here is that shapeshifting, to me, mutability, is something that we can develop a better relationship with. It starts with thinking about it through the lens of astrology, and also giving ourselves permission to then practice it energetically and seeing what little exercises we can do in our reality, right? In our day-to-day reality. Shapeshifting to me is a natural part of existence. And many of us who live in the so-called Western culture have been indoctrinated into this idea that there's a singular self that we're here to find, right? And once we find that singular self, our job is to hold on to that and then to persistently show up in that one way, right? Be true to yourself and then to communicate to everybody in that one way. To me, this is actually misguided authenticity, right? This is very prevalent in the United States culture where I live. We hear sayings like, oh, just be yourself, being thrown around with the subtext that, again, there's only one true you and that your job is to hold on to that no matter what, right? To show up as that one true version of you and to, say like the world be damned, right? Let the world or reality just adapt to who you are, and whoever doesn't like that, it's their problem, not my problem. And then somehow that will solve all of our problems. You'll never have issues again. You'll find happy ever after because you've quote unquote found yourself. The end. Easy peasy, right? But I'm really speaking to those of us, myself included, who know this to be a fallacy, not just because something doesn't feel right about it, but because in the path that we've been walking in this lifetime, that just hasn't been true, right? We haven't ever gotten to a point where we find that one true self and we're able to stick with it and then we are good for the rest of our lives, right? I got into astrology because I was trying to figure out who I am. I wanted that one sentence summary of who I am. But what I found in astrology instead is this complex, nuanced answer of who I am. And at first, that was a little bit confusing, right? Because I'm like, wait, I thought that this tool can teach me who I am, and then I'll be happy with that, right? But what it showed me instead was that who I am is this really complex being. And so what I'm learning from deepening into astrology, and specifically as a very mutable person, I'm a Virgo rising with Pisces sun and Gemini moons. My angles are all mutable. My luminaries are both in mutable signs. And my ascendant ruler, Mercury, is in Pisces. So I'm an extremely mutable person, both a blessing and a curse, like everything else. I realized that my sense of self is so much more flexible and adaptable than that one true self model, right? And because of the wealth and the richness of who I am, each person that I interact with bring out a slightly different flavor from me. Each situation that I interact with bring out a slightly different flavor. And I'm always responding to the world around me because I am a being who's relational. My very existence, my very actions and reactions are always in response to the world around me. Sure, I can cultivate a moral compass, right? But ultimately, what the outside world sends my way always plays a role in determining how I respond. In other words, I am always shapeshifting. The question is, I think, how conscious am I in my shapeshifting? How conscious am I that I'm shapeshifting at all? And if I become more conscious with my shapeshifting, I can maybe then start to get into a deeper exploration of my intention. Why am I shapeshifting? How conscious am I of the impact that my shapeshifting has on the people and on the world around me? And when I'm conscious of my shapeshifting nature, perhaps there's something else that emerges, right? Perhaps I can consciously bring my gifts. I can consciously challenge some of the prevalent ways of being and beliefs that are not conducive and that are not healthy for the ecosystem I exist within, all while honoring my multidimensionality. In other words, to me, conscious shapeshifting is about honoring our relationality, honoring our multidimensionality, becoming an agent for the kind of change that we wish to see in the world. I believe that when we allow ourselves to be multidimensional, to not be stuck in one identity or one role or one way of looking at the world, then a whole world of creative possibilities begin to open up for us. Not only do we get better at problem solving, we start to embody the new realities that we crave for the world around us. The ripple effect of our embracing of our shape-shifting mutable nature is massive, right? And this challenge in allowing our multidimensional selves to come and to skillfully navigate putting on different hats with ease and joy is something that I've noticed as a through line in my one-on-one client work. Many people who come to me are really struggling with being someone who contains multitudes. Maybe they see themselves as both a mother and an artist, and there's a little bit of tension in the conversation between the two different parts, right? Maybe the mother part wants to be selfless and wants to be giving and wants to be this endless fountain of resource and healing for those around them. Meanwhile, the artist part wants to take chances, wants to be bold, wants to take a risk, wants to create a huge energetic studio space so that anything and everything can come out, right? So that the largeness of their visions and expressions can live out loud openly in the real world. Maybe they see themselves as savvy entrepreneur and a healer, right? And the entrepreneur part has this idea that they know will be able to make them lots and lots of money and help lots and lots of people. Whereas the healer part of them understands the potency of being more private. There's absolutely power in that. There's power in really allowing the focus of their work to be on their clients and their students and to hold space that is neutral, that is loving, that is devoid of any kind of agenda, including expanding their own business, right? So there are always these parts of us that are kind of in conversation, in a tense conversation with one another, you know? And that tense conversation is not something that we need to eradicate. It's not something that we need to stop. It's not something that we need to push away. Because often that's what gives us nuance and complexity and, frankly, deep power and potency in our work. At the same time, what I see as a pattern, both in myself and in a lot of my clients and students, is that we beat ourselves up over this tension, right? Many of us who are deeply aware of our own multidimensionality are extremely scared of letting that show. Because when we allow ourselves to express our full range, we'll inevitably impact the world around us. Some people are really going to love it. Some people are really going to hate it. And when we spend so much time and so much energy hiding this multidimensional part of us so that we can be understood, so that we stay as a good person, so that we can belong, so that our work is really quote unquote aligned, right? It actually is an energetic leak. It's not the most efficient way. It's not the most effective way. It's not the most satisfying, peaceful, loving ways to be in the world. And it's not the best way to help our people find us either. So in some ways, hiding our multidimensionality, trying to fit in a box, is not great for our health. It perpetuates some hidden shame that we still have within us. And it's not that great for business either, unfortunately. It's not great for our relationships, right? And so, to me, learning how to shapeshift consciously can bridge this gap between the warring parts between us, right? Because claiming and permissioning ourselves to be shapeshifters recognize that first and foremost, we are neither exclusively one thing or another, right? We are neither exclusively an artist nor a mother. We are neither exclusively a business person or a healer, right? Maybe we're a little bit of both, right? That maybe we like to have some things organized in our lives and other things really roaming free and just what it is. Maybe you're the kind of person who want to have really clear organization in your wardrobe, right? But you don't care about cleaning up your inbox. Your inbox is like, has like hundreds of thousands of emails, right? We don't have to be one thing everywhere in all aspects of our lives. I think we know this, but it's really hard to actually accept that in our being. Many of us are able to do anything artistic or healing or creative or beautiful at all in this world because of the fact that we are navigating that tension. If you're an artist or if you're a healer, chances are you still need to pay your bills and you still need to navigate what it means to promote your work, to keep some semblance of a personal life that's separate from your work, also to make enough to survive in capitalism, right? So if you're listening this far, you might be like, okay, yes, I resonate with this. And then the question is, beyond permissioning ourselves to be a shapeshifter, what else can we do? Why should we cultivate deeper skills around shapeshifting, right? This is where I think things get really juicy and where we can bring in a little bit of skill. What I see with a lot of my clients and myself too, because I'm kind of my own primary client as a practitioner, is we really only shapeshift when we're forced to. We shapeshift when there's external pressure. Sometimes the external pressure is really extreme, like maybe a loved one is getting sick or dying, and then we realize, okay, we need to make sure that our business is less reliant on us, right? Or maybe we are losing a primary income or stream and we need to pivot in our business, right? Something kind of that feels like an emergency, right? Or sometimes it's maybe more low pressure, where it's more of a peer pressure kind of thing, right? That maybe we see people around us doing things a certain way and then we're like, okay, let me try that. Like maybe you see all your friends getting on Substack and you're like, okay, maybe I can try that, right? Because other people are doing it, especially for those of us who struggle with people pleasing just a little bit. We might find that this is the case for us, right? That we shapeshift into a different way of being when there's an external invitation. And sometimes I shapeshift when the internal pressure is great, right? When I'm experiencing some sort of dark night of the soul, when I'm experiencing some sort of reckoning, when there's a significant tectonic rupture in my relationship, basically when the judgment card comes into my life, that's when I start to consciously shapeshift, right? Very rarely do I practice shapeshifting in a way that is low stakes, that's fun. I very rarely apply and hone my shapeshifting skills consciously with creativity, with joy, with fun, right? Maybe even being a little flirty about it. And I don't think this is really not good. Because the only way to get good at doing something, I've found this to be true with all of my experiences, is if we start associating something with it being fun, with it being kind of lighthearted, with it being no pressure, right? I think our adult mind sometimes reject this. We kind of think of this as being childish or basic, right? But when we associate something with pain and fear and difficulty, right, we resist putting in the daily devotion that's needed to build a solid relationship with the thing. And when we don't have solid relationships with something, we don't get really good at it, because we only pull it out of the storage room when we really need to, right? We don't use it on a daily basis, Think of it in terms of any basic skills you have, right? Like, I know exactly how to use my coffee grinder because I use it every morning. However, if there's another tool in my household that I don't use very much, like for example, maybe some of my musical equipments I don't use every day, I have to take a moment, right, to really figure out every time I want to use it, how does this thing work, So, yeah, I think that when I think about Shapeshifting Academy, what I want to create is this opportunity for people to really have all these tools and these practices where we can play around with what it means to energetically shapeshift, right? To relationally shapeshift, to creatively shapeshift in very low stakes situations. Let me give an example. I have had a really challenging relationship with my newsletters. That there's this part of me that when it comes to creating my podcast, I feel very excited. Like, I want to create my podcast. I can make 5 podcasts a week. This is true, by the way. But when it comes to creating my newsletter or writing, I'm kind of like, writing is so hard. And that's perpetuated by the fact that I don't write every day. And what I found recently in the past 3-4 months is I've made myself write every day. And when I write every day, and not just writing in my journal, I'm writing something every day, including maybe things or ideas that I want to develop to share with all of you on this podcast. When I do that, what I realize is writing becomes a little bit more easeful. Writing becomes a little bit more fun. And then I'm like, ooh, I want to write some more. I'm curious about what comes up tomorrow, right? And so when I start to apply my shape-shifting skills, right? And in this case, what I mean is I tried to, at first, when I was first starting my journey with writing, I noticed that I have a very narrow definition of writing. I try to write basically from my sage self, right? Like, you're listening to this because you're into astrology, so I can use astrological archetypes. Like, I feel like I was trying to write more from my Pisces and my Virgo self, right? I was trying to write as this really gentle, healing force in the world. I speak in elven English. If any of you watch Lord of the Rings or Rings of Power, you know what I'm talking about. And then I realized it's so tiring for me to continue writing in that voice, and I had to start shifting. And I tried writing, okay, what if I write more like normal Jonathan? Jonathan who is not host of the Healing the Spirit podcast, right? What if I start writing as Jonathan the friend, or Jonathan who's drank 3 cups of coffee in a day, right? What if I channel that Jonathan in my writing? And it shifted my writing so much and my experience of writing so much, because suddenly I'm like, wow, within 20 minutes, I have something very solid written, and it's fun. It's kind of crazy. It has mistakes. It has issues in them, but I can come back later, right? I can refine it later. I don't have to do it now. So what I mean is, when we allow ourselves to shapeshift, right? When I'm no longer Pisces, Virgo, Jonathan, and I start to be more Gemini, Sagittarius, Jonathan, then I start to have more fun writing, and I want to go to my writing spot every day, So in Shapeshifting Academy, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be exploring what the mutable signs can teach us about this. We're going to be talking about a lot of different frameworks that we can play with, that is modular, that we can kind of move around, so that we can infuse a little bit more mutability, a little bit more multidimensionality and flexibility into our lives. And in so doing, access more of our creativity, access more of our joy and satisfaction, and create better relationships, honestly, in our lives. So what I'm going to end us on is some definitions of shapeshifting, because to me, what I'm really referring to is a very specific kind of shapeshifting, because that's the kind of shapeshifting that I've been doing myself, that I know how to do, right? And I know that shapeshifting has a long history, and it carries with it different connotations from various mythologies, various cultures, various belief systems, and people might have, if you're listening, you might be like, ooh, shapeshifting sounds kind of scary. Like, what is Jonathan talking about? So I want to clarify what I mean specifically by shapeshifting. These are not the only definitions that are valid of shapeshifting, obviously, but this is the kind of shapeshifting I'm talking about. I'm a modern mystic. I'm a Virgo rising, so I like to teach things that are practical, right? Things that we can use to help make our lives a little bit better and a little bit easier. I'm not really interested in doing some super far out, crazy spiritual stuff that kind of separates us from the rest of society because I want to participate. That's the kind of work that I do, and that's the kind of work that I want to invite people into. I want to invite people into deeper relationships with their existing lives. I don't want to teach stuff that will require people to leave their lives, leave their relationships, unless that's what they want, you know? So yeah, I would say that for me, the kind of shapeshifting I'm talking about here is very much like day-to-day shapeshifting that we can implement in our reality today. So one definition of shapeshifting is basically code switching, right? We've already been alluding to this. Because we contain multitudes, different parts of us come out in different containers with different people, right? You might be one way at work and you may be another way at home. Once I had a dear friend, her name is Judy. Hi, Judy, if you're listening to this, who told me something that really stuck with me. She's a multidisciplinary artist. She works with multiple different modalities. And she said, when I'm in my artist studio making these huge abstract paintings, I scream and I yell and I throw paint all onto the canvas. Right now, you know, you don't know Judy, but I know Judy. My friend Judy is this really sensitive, gentle soul. So I really got a kick out of her sharing this, right? Because I'm imagining like, wow, Judy getting really aggressive with her paint, you know, sounds so incredible because she's this very like soft-spoken, poetic person, you know, and it's kind of incredible for me as her friend to know that she has a container in her life, a context where it makes sense for her to channel more of that Kali energy, right? That raging goddess energy. Now, many of us have these sides to us that we know is somewhere in there, but we're really scared of letting it out. For me, that is my inner troublemaker. I have this inner outlaw within me. If you've been listening to the podcast regularly, you will know this. You know, there is a part of me that likes to poke a little bit at like that thing that we think is the right way to be or the status quo, right? Like I like to investigate these things and bring it out into the court and like talk about it, you know, and that side of me often gets into trouble. When I was a child, you know, I was always touching everything. A lot of things break. And I also used to be that child who would just bring my crayons everywhere and start drawing everywhere. And people are like, that's not appropriate, right? I was always a maker, an artist, and a little bit of a rule breaker, honestly, you know? And I think that these parts of us, it's not enough to just embrace them on an emotional level. You need to create containers in your life where they can really come out, where they can really take the rein, where they can really hold the steering wheel. And I think when we learn to shapeshift consciously, we learn to create these containers. And then we get better at recognizing, okay, in this container, in this circumstance, that part of me can really come out. We don't have to reject it. We don't have to control it. We don't have to tone it down. And then we can learn more about it. And in learning more about it, we can actually use it for various instances in our lives where they can actually play a really powerful and important role. All parts of you exist because they play a role in the ecosystem, right? All parts of you exist because there's something in them that brings forth not only a true and honest reflection of your spirit and your soul, but a true part of your gift, right? Some parts of us may not have had the container to express themselves fully in a way that they can feel appreciated and safe. And yet it doesn't mean that they don't have gifts. It doesn't mean that they don't have intelligence that can change the world for the better, right? And so one of the premises of Shapeshifting Academy is once we identify this part of us that we are a little bit afraid of tapping into because maybe we're afraid of how other people will be, or maybe we're afraid that we will hurt ourselves. You know, can we design environments and contexts where the stakes are low and where we can, over a period of time, practice embodying that part? One case in point is this is what I'm actually doing with Shapeshifting Academy. So if you look at the course page for Shapeshifting Academy, or if you've been on my email list listening to me talk about this, I've been experimenting with a more brash, a wilder, a less concerned with like pristine reputation, impeccable delivery part of me, right? That you may have seen if you follow me on Threads. If you follow me on Threads, you'll really see kind of like my Gemini moon on full display, right? When this offering came through, I decided that I want to breathe more life into this more Gemini moon part of me. This is the energy that I want to show up more as. If you look at my course page, for example, it's very different from the rest of the website. Shapeshifting Academy has its own energy, has its own color combination, right? And it has its own aesthetics, and I'm taking very seriously in talking about this offering the act of not taking myself or the work too seriously, right? My findings so far with code switching or pivoting is it brings up a lot. It brings up our fears of being judged by other people. It brings up all the pain that we've held on to of other times in our lives when we show up in that way and people didn't like it. People punished us, right? For me, actually, my own internal entitlement too, because there's this idea that like, okay, I've been doing a lot of work, so that I can show up more as this fun, slightly unhinged version of myself. I've put in my heart and soul in being more authentic. I should get the results that I wanted, which is, I think over time, maybe true. I'll report to all of you later, but it's not always true. Authenticity is not a tool for success, necessarily. I mean, a certain kind of success, right? I don't think that, I think sometimes we think when we're being authentic that the immediate result is that we're going to make a lot of money, we're going to expand our work, we're going to have the best relationships right away. No, this is not true. I think when we practice deeper authenticity, oftentimes there is an adjustment period. Reality needs to adjust to the fact that we are now saying yes to ourselves more and more, right? And taking up more space. And the results may not come right away. And I think the point of authenticity is actually that you get to do the work that you want to do in a way that's more fun for you, in a way that's more sustainable for you, So how can astrology help with shapeshifting, or specifically shapeshifting as code switching, right? So let's take Virgo, for example. Virgo is a mutable earth sign, right? So Virgo has a lot to do with finding the container, designing the earthly context where it makes sense for us to code switch. To use my example with this course, I designed an experience that's only 6 weeks, right? So throughout the 6 weeks, I can really give myself permission to channel more of this like troublemaker and this mad creator energy, and also invite people who wants more of that for themselves, Think Yayoi Kusama meets like James Dean in Rebel Without a Cause, right? 6 weeks is a pretty long time to hold an energy in my being, but it's not impossible, right? And if I don't like it after 6 weeks, the next time maybe I run this course, I can run a slightly different energy, and I can experiment with it. I can consciously design it, right? Design the parameters. So for you, perhaps what feels scary is the part of you that knows that you're a creative genius, Or maybe the part of you that's the emperor, the ruler, the leader of the pack. Or maybe the child, the innocent, right? Or maybe the sage, or maybe the empress. So allowing ourselves to be seen in our wisdom is scary. Allowing ourselves to be seen in our multidimensional expressions can be scary. And in this course, what we'll do is we'll play with creating the conditions where more parts of you can come out and play, and to consistently touch in with that part while working through the crunchiness, the pain, the fear, the rage that may come up with that, and healing some of that, right? Another definition of shapeshifting that I'm playing with is walking multiple realms at the same time. So this may be easier to explain with an example. Maybe you're someone who really loves astrology and energy healing, right? But you also really like science. You can't get enough of Chris Brennan's 4-hour defense on the whole sign system, right? But you also can't get enough of documentaries about the mycelial network, right? True story for me. Here's the deal. So much of the Western colonial capitalist supremacist society asks us to niche down. There's this subliminal, under the level subconscious message that's also really pervasive, which is if you don't pick a lane, then get really good at what you decided to pick, you're basically fucked, right? We see this with the college system, for example. We have to pick a major and we have to get really good at it so that we can be hired. And your major in college will determine what jobs you can get, right? And while we love this idea of the geniuses who make disparate connections, people who bring together different worlds, different disciplines, people who surprise us with making kind of connections that we didn't see before, we often don't appreciate that in order for these people to get there, they need a certain process, right? So let me tell you a secret. When you look at these people who are bridging different realms, who seem like a genius because they're mixing two things that on the surface don't seem to make sense together, they didn't do this overnight. They did not do this overnight, right? This is a process to get good at bringing together disparate elements, disparate ideas, disparate ways of being, and then to create something coherent, something that actually can be of service around it. It's a skill that takes a lot of time, takes a lot of courage, and that may cost people short-term profit because they have to be okay with people not understanding what the fuck they're doing for some time. And most people don't even let themselves get close to doing this. Why? Because they're scared, right? Because we're so scared of our own multidimensional way of being, our own ability to walk multiple realms at the same time that we don't even think that it's a possibility, right? So if you want to create work that's original, if you want to create something that feels fresh, that hasn't really been seen before, you've got to follow the muse. You've got to follow your instinct. And the funny paradox is that sometimes in striking and doing your own thing, you end up being the respectable expert that you've always been destined to be, right? But that path actually looks not like climbing a ladder linearly. That path actually looks like falling down a bunch of rabbit holes and slowly over time knowing how to take yourself out of these rabbit holes and making something out of that experience. You can certainly spend your whole life just falling down one rabbit hole after another, but my guess is if you're interested in something like Shapeshifting Academy, you want to do something that satisfies you, something that you can showcase. You want skills, right? So this is where Sagittarius can help. Because as a mutable fire sign, Sagittarius teach us how to see the through line. What is the large current of idea that's really stringing us along? Sagittarian work to me has a lot to do with taking time, rooting down, and cultivating some amount of faith, to take a step back, to look at the things we've been doing, to look at the research, and to begin creating a through line. Sagittarian work has to do with creating a cosmology, creating a mythology, creating a framework within which all of our disparate interests can coexist. Once you have a container that feels big enough, whether that container is mental or whether that container is an actual thing in your lived experience, like maybe a title that feels like that it can encompass all the different things that you do, then all of your explorations will start talking to one another. When I got into this work, meaning this mystical healing work, I had this whole narrative in my head that I need to quit my day job as a statistician. I had this whole idea that in order to be taken seriously as a healer and to really honor my gifts, I need to make it a full-time gig. I remember early on, I had a tarot reading with Sophie Strand. Some of you may know Sophie's work. Some of you may love Sophie's work. And back in the days, Sophie did tarot readings. And she told me in that reading that, and I'm paraphrasing here, something like, you're here to be a secret agent. when we enter into studying the occult, when we study the hidden, when we study things like astrology and tarot, we enter a lineage of secret agents. These are the people who speak in codes, in secret, in arcana, right? These are the people who hide deep wisdom in art, in poetry, in seemingly mundane things so that they can be proliferated, so that they can be passed on to the next generation and to people who are willing and ready to listen to the wisdom. You're here to do something similar, meaning this is Sophie talking to me, right? So she was saying, like, I was here to do something similar and to learn how to share my wisdom in ways that different audiences can understand. That's kind of the gist of what she told me. And something I found so shocking is that, many years after that reading, she was right. There was a way in which my day job and my interaction with my coworkers taught me so much about energy, taught me so much about communications, taught me so much about reconciliation and healing. I've been in work meetings where people keep talking and saying words and not actually communicating or connecting to one another, which taught me that sometimes the best communication doesn't happen through words, right? And knowing that on a deep level helped me become a better practitioner, because sometimes it gives me permission to slow down within sessions with my clients and really see what's going on here and help them put language slowly to something that is there, but that they may not have language to talk about, right? And the reverse is also true. Through my creative and mystical work in offering containers and facilitating experiences like Shapeshifting Academy, in doing readings and mentorship and having a podcast, I learned more about my relationship with money. I learned more about expanding my work, right? Again, it might seem a little counterintuitive, but actually it makes so much sense. The reality is that everything is connected to everything. And sometimes when we give ourselves permission to expand our definitions and our containers, we learn the hidden lessons that our conscious minds don't even allow us to see before. So, if all of this sounds exciting to you, I hope you will consider joining Shapeshifting Academy. Again, we begin on October 3rd, 2024. And yeah, I'm super excited about it. You can read about it on the course page. It will all be linked below. And yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this episode where I talk about shapeshifting and mutability. And the last thing I want to share is, if you would like to hear me talk about the eclipse, I recently was on my friend Martha Alter Heinz's YouTube channel, and we talk all about astrology, specifically astrology of the coming eclipse. And there's also a lot of things I share there about mutability, because the sky will be very mutable during that eclipse. And so, yeah, maybe you'll find that interesting to check out. I'll link it in the show notes below. And I hope that you consider joining us for Shapeshifting Academy. And I hope you have a beautiful rest of your September. I'm sending you so much love, and I can't wait for us to meet again. I'm going to be talking about different facets of Shapeshifting Academy, and hopefully some of that will be interesting to you. Thank you, friends. So much love, and I'll see you soon. Take care.